All right. So the next section, Chris, is reporting on commissions. And this is kind of one that can really take a lot of different ways. And I've seen, matter of fact, I was just talking the other day on a prospect about theirs, and they had an interesting concept where they wanted to allow the quote unquote consigners of the marketplace to set their own markup. And one of the things he was saying to me, we're down in the Texas area and he happened to be down in Houston, is he deals a lot with oil and gas. And he's, like these oil pumps, if they don't end up using them, they dump them on us and then we try to go sell them. The problem is nobody wants them and it takes they're very expensive and it takes a long time for us to market them. They take up space. They want us to warehouse it and everything. So for me, I take a 50% markup and I'm like, holy cow, are you kidding me? He goes, no. And I'm like, interesting. And he says, but, on other items, somebody could be bringing in an item that's really hot to trot and says, I want 20%. And I may come back and go, or I may think I want 20%. And they're like, no, you're going to get 5 at best because I know it's going to sell super quickly. And I know it's going to bring more business to my site. So I'll take 5. So he was even talking about every single item, every single auction, every single thing listed on his marketplace to be able to have a unique and separately negotiated uplift for commission, right? So I'd never seen anything like that before. So I'm going to turn it over to you for a minute and talk about commissions, how they work in a marketplace, technically how we can apply that, and maybe talk about the different ways that they might be applied on a per seller level based on, distributors are always 13%, wholesalers are always 21%, value-added resellers or whatever are 30%, something like that, where you can set it at the type level, or you want to set it at the actual, I know we're talking marketplace, but auction sites or marketplace too, could be either on the auction or on the item or category level. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of tear into that a little bit.
Well, yeah, that was great, Ron, and thanks. And I think you hit on a lot of key thoughts there, which are fundamentally, can boil it down to this concept of we can do whatever makes sense for the business. And that's really what you want to look for with a vendor is, can they customize these commissions so that they match your business over time? And this is a pretty sensitive area for folks because, frankly, if you sort of look at businesses at scale, some of them have a very simple, almost like a cleaver style of commissions. It's just this one way and that's it. And everything just gets chopped up into that, right? And then a lot of them are based on, just like you said, the category. This can be sort of a dynamic thing that's based on traffic levels. So, the theory might be that it requires a lot more brand awareness and oomph from the brand to get somebody to convert on the site because it's just a low traffic category. So maybe the commissions are higher on that because they're, in theory, attracting more value to the marketplace by coming onto the marketplace. So we want to let them keep more. Maybe we're in a situation where we effectively, we are looking at volume. So we could say, okay, well, after you achieve a certain level of volume, be it revenue volume, most likely, or transactions with a certain rating, there are different ways to slice and dice this, but based on this algorithm, and it can be fairly simple, and it generally needs to be something that the seller can actually understand. Not just can they see it and figure it out, but do they subconsciously associate with it quickly? That's going to give you a lot of opportunity to really encourage the right behaviors. If you do things like say, look, you have different bands of commissions that you're going to receive based on your average seller rating or your average buyer's rating of you as a seller. What's your fulfillment time? And if you sort of stay within a certain band of performance, then you get a sort of baseline commission set. And then within that, it's based on the category. There's a lot of sophistication we can add there that can be very easily explanatory explained. Apparently words are hard for me, so maybe I need a lower commission for my performance.
More caffeine.
But ultimately, that's one of the really cool things about these commissions, right? And the other thing that I like to look at is just making sure that the sellers understand and that they're encouraged. A lot of times they'll start out with pretty low commissions, and it might be helpful to look at some other sellers and de-identify the data, but say, like, based on your track that you're on, if you keep progressing, we've seen similar sellers that progressed from your point, and a year later they were at this point. So keep going, like, keep your chin up. And those kind of things can actually be really helpful coming from the marketplace itself, because gosh, I mean, if I know that others in the marketplace directly have had much success and I can get encouragement from the marketplace as to what to do, I mean, that's beautiful. So, but yeah, I mean, it's really important for people to be able to visualize it and see it and understand it quickly.
Yeah. And I think you're onto something there with the incentivization, right? Because you could even have, your first 3 items commission free to try out our platform. You want to entice somebody to try the platform and bring on additional sellers, then you can run quote unquote promotions. Well, how do you run a promotion for a seller? Let them have some free commission sales, right? You don't take a commission or you don't take a cut on the first X number of sales or the first week or the first day or, whatever that looks like. So that's kind of the front end of setting the commissions. Let's talk about the back end, because the back end is one that we deal with a lot. For example, like with Amazon Seller Central, a lot of our clients come in, orders, if they get placed on Amazon, get sent down. And we know this because we do the integration work, right, between their platform and Amazon. And so we're processing orders immediately that come in from Amazon, but then Amazon only pays out twice a month, right? So then they send the report down that they're paying on the 15th and the 30th. And then we have all this reconciliation work to do, because you've got scammers that, they order 10 items and then you ship them. And the second they see this ship notification, they go back to Amazon and do a return. And now it leaves the sellers fighting for trying to get refunds and stuff like that. So a big part of commissions is the reconciliation. And I know we struggle with that, helping, and we've got some great technical solutions we've done for interim reconciliation for Amazon, because it only happens every other week. I know for some of the other marketplaces we've done, when the seller signs up, they'll add in their PayPal account. Right. And so as soon as an item sells and clears and the order gets placed, our platform can immediately take the platform commission out and immediately pay the PayPal back. It could be reconciled at the end of each day, where it's immediately paid back, put right back into their account. It can be put back into credit on their account, which can be cashed out. I mean, there's dozens of different ways. So Chris, switch gears and talk about how do the sellers and the owners of the platform, how do they report on commissions? How do they view where are the commissions? How do they pay those commissions out? Right?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and this gets really detailed, because this is ultimately reconciling back to their, to their accounting system. And this can be quite a challenge. Frankly, it can create a large headache for your sellers that you don't want to have. Too much friction is going to be very negative in the long run. So probably the biggest thing is that they understand when they're going to get finalized data and how we're going to handle refunds and any sort of adjustments. It's interesting because in the example that you just mentioned with Amazon, and this is true with other marketplaces as well. We see this a lot with like Etsy, and Walmart has a marketplace that you can sell into. And there really is a large list of just different marketplaces that we've worked with. A lot of them have reconciliation reports that they'll send out that sort of take care of any delta and have an explanation and an explanation code that is associated with any reconciliation amounts that come out. So there will be sort of like a standard commission report, and that'll be 90 to 100% of what the actual commissions would be, but then there may be some damage to the item, or there may be a refund request. And so that refund has to go through the commissions, depending on the terms, may get refunded, of course, hopefully. And then basically the theory would be that if there is a bad shipment or there's additional taxes, customs and duties, how is that reconciled? And so that's something that can be done incrementally in another set of reconciliation reports. And that can also be done in a periodic fashion, so that once a week, that data is going to come out, or every night at this time, or that kind of a thing, so that the team, the seller's team within their accounting department, can pull this data via API or bulk reporting and bring that into their accounting software. And this, one of the things that I think is so interesting, Ron, is a lot of these software platforms do not do a good job of providing reasonable explanations as to why a particular reconciliation or adjustment to a line item occurred. So they literally don't know. And they also don't roll those costs back up into a consistent report. So a lot of times with like Amazon and other marketplaces, our clients are literally left to try to put the pieces together from this, massive marketplace that has billions of dollars a year going into just their software. And they still don't bother to really build out a lot of the reconciliation. So long story short, I would say that that's a huge aspect. We work with so many clients that are frustrated by this, and you really want to, as a marketplace, make it as low friction as possible for your sellers to understand what are they paying, what are the fees, and how can you automatically reconcile that back in.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think that covers commissions pretty well. Bottom line is commissions are not easy, right? And you need to work with a vendor similar to Clarity that deals in custom platforms, that has dealt with all the different nuances, one, or two, because they can customize and have dealt with so many nuances. They've got information that they can help you determine exactly what's best for your business. And then the platform that they've built can support the customizations that you need for your business. All right, moving on. Let's go talk about some international marketplaces now, and some of the things that are interesting with international marketplaces now. And we'll cover in a later video GDPR and privacy. So this one is really just about the taxes, right? So we've got different kinds of taxes. We've got GST, we've got VAT, which might also have to come with some customs or duties forms. There might have to do some additional shipping labels. Let's just talk briefly about international marketplace and how, at least the taxes for now. We don't have to go into all the shipping and intermodal and all that, but let's talk briefly about the taxes. So I'm going to kind of hand that one to you. How do we, and I'll just ask you a couple questions to prime it. How do we determine if an item gets associated or gets assigned those taxes? Who pays those taxes? Is that tax paid by the seller? Is that eaten by the seller? Is that paid or added to for the buyer? How does the buyer pay for that? And how does that get determined? I know the answers. So these are all just primers for you, right? To kind of tee it up for you.
Yeah. It's really interesting whenever you get into the weeds of the taxes side of things, and you look at, I guess one of the things that I always like to talk about is, first of all, with a marketplace and the basis for taxation, the typical scenario is, where is the item going to? Like, where is it being shipped to? Not where is it billed from or billed to, but where is it being delivered? And so that's probably the most important thing to understand first, is what's sort of the basis for the taxation. And it's pretty interesting whenever it's a split shipment, and looking at all the different jurisdictions. And then the other thing that I would say that's pretty interesting is if you sort of look at like how a lot of different businesses operate online, when they're not in a marketplace, they will tend to decide when they're ready to deal with taxes in a correct way. that matches all the different jurisdictions. And it's
Right.
crazy, but they sort of are like relying on the idea that I'm a little fish in a big pond. And, you know, I'll just put the effort into this whenever it makes sense. And that's really rough because a lot of businesses that are small, they don't have the resources to actually calculate taxes, VAT, be able to deal with all of that. And it's really tough. I mean, you have to deal with all the paperwork, all of the calculations, keeping the tables of data up to date, understanding like this jurisdiction in this zip code has a different tax rate. In this particular state or jurisdiction, it's just the entire state is at this tax rate, or this entire state or country doesn't even have taxes on commerce, or
Right.
maybe of this category, it's a different rate. And so it's just really interesting. But yeah, the way that I would say it is not only does it break down based on those aspects, like where is it going, what category is it? Because some categories of item, they actually have product codes that are less tax, different tax, no tax, and then ultimately, like, what's the jurisdiction? And one of the questions I always like to get answered, and this is, if we're working with another marketplace, is how are we going to get this reporting data, and who's going to file the tax reports? And that's a lot of work. I mean, if you're doing this at scale across different jurisdictions, you could be talking about, hundreds or thousands of counties that someone has to report to. And it needs to be accurate. You get a bunch of penalties and fees if you don't do it right. And that's just like a death by a thousand paper cuts. So it's a really big deal. It's one of those things that I think this day and age, Ron, most of the sellers are going to sort of expect this to be built in. If you don't really have this built in, you're probably going to be dealing with a lot of friction and challenge. And ultimately, I would say, just as a general rule of thumb, you're going to want to work with a third party API provider who can automatically calculate and send the reports and do them respective to the sellers and have that level of fidelity, including VAT, customs and duties, et cetera. And so, foundationally, that's what we're looking at here is, do we have that ability to be able to get into those weeds and then provide that reporting, and possibly file those reports on behalf of the sellers. And again, this includes customs and duties, being able to deal with VAT, being able to deal with all of the legal paperwork, restricted items, different categories of items, and accurately reporting on those. Curious what your thoughts are on this as well.
Yeah, I agree. I remember, when I started, I mean, I was working with you for years before I joined the team, right? But when we started 10 and a half years ago, we had that company, and I remember its name because it was so funny, Orange Octopus. You remember that one? And we were dealing with this, and I
Yes,
remember
sir.
talking to you about it because I was trying to figure out how to demo it and what the value prop was that we did for them. And when you took me through the demo and showed me how, every on our platform, how it plugged into everybody else's platform. And I remember, trying to remember the guy's name. It's like Johnny Miller, but I know he's the golfer. But there was the tire store up in Utah, and I remember going to their website, and you were showing me like they check out for tires, and it goes through their website. But you notice here, if I put the ship to address as France, it immediately jumps to another page, and now all of a sudden I can put it in French francs, I can put it in euros, I can put it in anything I want, and here's VAT, and here's GST, and here's the customs and duties forms, and here's the shipping label, and it all of a sudden had all this other stuff, and you're like, this is our platform. We built this platform for Orange Octopus, and they sell this as a platform that can plug into anybody who wants or needs to be able to ship internationally. Our platform handles all the APIs, all the taxes, all the calculations, shipping labels, everything. And I remember that was the first time that I really dealt with international shipping. I knew about it, but I never was in the weeds, right? And I never saw all the bits and moving pieces. And I was just blown away And as you described it to me, all the different levers and APIs and situations and who had to pay it and how many filings there were. It was almost the same conversation I have with Avalara, right? We're an Avalara certified partner. And so when I was working on the partnership with them, they're like, and for X numbers of dollars, we will go in and file every single county's tax report for a company if they sign up as a client, and it's really inexpensive. And I'm like, for the dollar amounts they were talking, and it was like $3.60 or something, like some stupid number. I'm like, I can't even stand up, turn around and find a piece of paper to write down which counties I need to report to for $3.60, right? It was just like, why wouldn't you do that? Anyway, it was really cool, very interesting, and I love dealing with taxes. So if you guys have any questions about taxes and you really want to talk to somebody who is passionate about it, give us a call, and we'd love to chat through that with you and help potentially find a solution.
Hear, hear.
The next thing we're going to talk about is integrations and how integrations deal with Marketplace. Now, the fun thing about this is these integrations usually are different than all of the other integrations. And I don't know necessarily why, because a lot of e-commerce that we do that are not in Marketplace, you would think that they would do a lot of drop shipping with their suppliers and things like that, but it just doesn't seem to be nearly as much, right? Because when you start getting into B2B and clients that have, their own ERPs and do their own fulfillment and warehousing, they have suppliers, but they end up warehousing it internally. So you don't end up having to have a ton of integrations out to all of the different sellers and suppliers and vendors and things as much as a marketplace, because a marketplace, that's literally all it is, right? It's bringing together this diverse group of sellers and vendors and buyers and suppliers, and everybody warehouses and ships their own stuff. And so it's this very cobbled together network. And so now, is the technological solution you're putting together as cobbled as the environment itself? Or you as the owner of the platform, when you sit down and build it, have you thought through it and figured out exactly how every bit and bobble would plug into this network so that it can run smoothly, so that they are incentivized, they sell more, you make more commissions, and your platform is a success, right? What is the barrier of entry to get connected to you? Is there a crawl, walk, and run option? If I wanted to, can I just log into your environment? I just want to try 3 products, so I can use your PIM and just add 3 products. If I want to do 25 products, I already have in a spreadsheet. Can I just import the spreadsheet? If I have 25,000 products, do I have an EDI or an API or a punch out? Can I connect to you via punch out and have them order on my website, but yet then connect to your website to check out and fulfill the order, even though I sold it on my website? How does that all work? So, Chris, I just kind of obviously just teased you with a few of them there. I want to turn it over to you and talk about all the different ways that we can connect this socially cobbled together network, right? Because 99% of the time, none of these sellers, vendors, suppliers know each other, right? It's just like everybody's going to eBay and there's 8 million people selling on eBay and another 8 million people buying on eBay, and nobody knows each other. And the most that they could ever do is ask the seller a question. And that's about it, right? There's no real connection there. But from a platform perspective, when you get into these very robust marketplaces that we deal with, there has to be a connection there. So talk about what are these connections, how do they work, and how does a platform, and there are others out there, but how does a platform like Clarity Connect and Vans, how do those work, and how do they support this type of environment?
Yeah, great question. And this is like the devil in the details whenever you want to scale up your marketplace, because it's kind of like the fax machine. It's like, can you imagine being the first salesman selling a fax machine? Like, you got this wonderful device and, you can scan papers through it and you can send it to, oh, wait, there's no one else out there with a fax machine. And it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. And that's what a marketplace is by definition. It's sort of this network effects type of a situation where, you really have to build up enough momentum and get that momentum going. And, integrations are single-handedly one of the best fulcrums, sort of a lever point to be able to pull against to reduce that friction. How can you make it easy to get massive amounts of valuable items that are for sale? They're kept up to date. Their lead times are accurate. The pricing is, high fidelity, so that if there's a large volume purchase, it's going to be reflected. If there's a repeat customer, it's going to be reflected. If there's a premier manufacturer or distributor, they're going to have a premier listing. And then, similarly for the buyer side of things, do we have a system for notifying them whenever something they're interested in is come on to the marketplace? And how are we optimizing this for organic SEO and advertising and on-site advertising and promotion and analytics? And so being able to pull the data in mass with high fidelity, this is sort of like the panacea. Like, this is the ultimate at the limit. Where we want to get to is almost like live in all of our sellers' systems and just dynamically pull everything in very intelligently. And that's really what integrations allow us to do. And if you sort of think about it, they all have different systems. Typically, they're going to be working on one of like the top 20 ERP systems, typically. There may be exceptions to that, but they're probably going to be using a standard protocol of some kind that they can send, push, and pull data with. So like you were mentioning, Ron, this will typically include REST, SOAP, EDI, Punch Out, CXML. I mean, the sort of the list goes on, but it's not a long list. And so the question that we would have for you as a marketplace owner, as a manager of a marketplace, as a business owner that runs a marketplace, what are you doing to reduce the friction so that you can take advantage of this fulcrum? How are you levering up around getting massive amounts of high fidelity data, products? And, the other thing that I think is really interesting about this too, Ron, is it's really interesting when you actually do it, because all of the different sellers and distributors and manufacturers, they have different categories. They have different descriptions and details for the same product. Same product, different category and description data, different imagery. How are you going to deal with all of that? And what kind of intelligence and workflow logic do you have in place? Or does your marketplace software that you're using have in place to be able to handle that gracefully and in an intelligent way that works? And so those are some of the things that I would encourage you to be thinking about, allowing folks to be able to use different protocols for integrating with your system, and making that really easy, making it so that when they do integrate, the data that they bring in doesn't contaminate things. It doesn't lower the standard, but it sort of is able to logically and reasonably select out the good data, and promote it throughout the system. And how much effort is involved in that? Is there any, if not just a small amount of manual effort, or is it a massive amount of manual effort? And the larger the manual effort, the less this is going to scale for you. So how is your software going to adapt and help you to be able to, build that infrastructure over time that allows you to scale with these integrations? Another thing that I'll point out just in general about the integration side of things too, is this can be a real, nowadays especially, this can be a real security risk. It can also be a concern for buyers, as well as sellers, that their data could be insecure. And so we're seeing a lot of with our different marketplaces is sort of this delineation between PII versus a situation where it's just de-identified generic information. So does your software platform account for that concept? This concept of like managing PII, or depending on the type of marketplace, it might be PHI, but it's personal information that folks have put into the marketplace that is you're legally liable for as a marketplace owner. How are you dealing with that and accounting for it? And what kind of security infrastructure do you have in place? And again, how manual is the process? Do you have to go through a really detailed manual process, or is it significantly automated where it should be?
Yeah. So I think that covers integration pretty well. I mean, I know we didn't go into all the integrations, but we talked about all the different types, and Chris mentioned a few of the different protocols that we connect. So you'll want to talk to a vendor that's got a platform similar to Clarity Connect that not only has connectors for all those different protocols, but can actually show you that they can connect to every ERP directly if you have a large vendor. I mean, if you were connecting to, let's say, a Target, obviously you're going to connect directly to their API, or they're going to want you to connect directly to their ERP in a highly secure manner for immediate and real and accurate data, right? In a secure method. Where most others, the cheap and easy, lowest hanging fruit is EDI. Chris made a mention there a minute ago, though, with EDI, when they dump a file and you go to import a file, it's very difficult to manipulate that data from the file. If you have a platform like Clarity Connect, one of the things we do allow you to do is transform data. So you could literally go into our Connect platform and do a remapping exercise where when you connect to these suppliers, if they pull information in and it comes in and says, I don't know, I'm trying to make something up, tires, dubs, whatever else, all the different words that kind of do around that, we want to transfer all that to this category called wheels. And everything goes into that category, right? So you're normalizing the data. So all of these different vendors that are bringing in different data, instead of it messing up your platform and you having 27 categories that are all basically the same thing, but people now are all going to 27 categories just to find tires, you've got a way to clean that up automatically. Can you imagine trying to go in and manually, after the fact, clean up tens of thousands of records just to try to normalize the data so people can find it and buy it? You can't do it. So part of the thing is not just the integration connecting you to your suppliers. It's how can we, when we connect and we give this ability to import, as Chris said, massive amounts of data, how can we ensure the integrity and the normalization of massive amounts of data? Do we allow massive amounts of mistakes to be imported very quickly and easily, and then we have to deal with that? Or do we have a platform that can deal with that, build out the rules, and enforce the normalization of that data? So that's a big part of the integration I want to mention that is interesting.
Yes, indeed. And that's really an interesting segue into AI and machine learning. And I mean, this is a really big topic in general. It doesn't just apply to bringing in data. It applies to a lot of different aspects of your marketplace. But one aspect that is really powerful is what I'm going to refer to, instead of artificial intelligence, it's augmentation intelligence. And that's really what a lot of, artificial intelligence and deep learning allows us to do. Is it allows us to augment what people are doing within your marketplace. And that's really how you want to think about artificial intelligence from a practical business perspective, at least in the short term, is it's going to allow you to augment things. What do I mean by that? Well, take relatively menial tasks that require some level of sophisticated, consistent context data, and it can be extreme data, like millions of records of data, and make a correlation and be able to call out variances from that and even correct variances. So an example would be like Ron, and the example you shared, tens of thousands of records that someone's trying to import. The artificial intelligence looks at that data as it's coming in and goes ahead and, puts a model in place that says, hey, it's a 74% likelihood that this piece of data doesn't meet our standards. It's a 97% confidence rate that this piece of data does not meet our standards. Okay, this piece of data does meet our standards. This one does, this one does, this one does. Oh, here's another one that's bad. And it can sort of do that menial work as we're running an integration. And one of the big questions that I would say, makes sense to ask about your software vendor for your marketplace is, are they thinking about these kind of things? Are they putting these kind of pieces in place to help you to be competitive? I think you would probably agree with this, Ron. Somebody's going to do it. Is it going to
Might
be
as
you?
well be us.
Yeah, might as well be us. Is it going to be your platform or is it going to be your competitors? And someone is absolutely going to take advantage of this opportunity to augment and provide extreme value. Now, like I said, there's a lot more that we can do with AI and machine learning. And I'm curious if you want to sort of open this up and talk about some of those areas, Ron. And maybe I can dive into some of the details of how they work.
Yeah. Sounds great. So you think about this, it's kind of like, it's much more intelligent than this, but the easy way to think about this is, I think everybody's got an email box, right? And we can go into that email box and I can go in and put, an email that says, hey, if anybody C-level or above emails me, I'm going to move that over to an executive folder. If anybody from Clarity emails me, I'm going to take that and move it over to my employee folder. Stuff like that, right? You're setting up these rules that tells the platform how to behave when certain things happen, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about. And that's how machine learning and this augmentation or artificial intelligence should work on your marketplace. So let's put that into applicable application. Let's say I go to a new marketplace and it's like a Home Depot, right? I go to like a Harbor Tools, Home Depot, Lowe's type of website where they sell a lot of tools. I've never logged in. I've never bought anything. It's my first time visiting. But the platform on the back end has a machine learning module, very similar to the one on our platform, that's literally tracking my every move. It's looking at all the products I'm looking at, and it's recording it to the session cookie because it doesn't have a user to associate that activity with yet, right? So it's really just the person's session. So Ron goes in there, and I'm looking at all these really cool hand tools because I'm old school. And then the very last thing I do is I check out a power drill, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then I leave the website. And I don't go back for a couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, I forgot about that marketplace. I'm going to go check it out. So I hit the marketplace. And the first thing that pops up when I hit the marketplace is a 10% coupon off hand tools. Holy cow, how did they know that I like hand tools? I've never even logged into this site. How would they know that? How did that personalized experience to try to get me off my butt and stop just looking at hand tools, but to actually potentially convert and buy one, how did they know? All right, well, that's machine learning. So that is a real world example that is real. I mean, we can do that today, right? And so, Chris, I want you to use, and we'll do a couple of those type live examples, right? That's one of them. Any other live example could be, and we've seen this quite often, most of the time it's relatively static. For example, if I go look at a laptop, like everybody knows Amazon, everybody buys on Amazon. But if I go to Amazon right now and I try to buy a laptop, down below, it's going to be a laptop plus a case plus this is this much money, right? Or similar or related items. Most of those lists are either static or they will just show a rotating carousel at the bottom of the page of all the other laptops in the laptop category. If I went to laptops and then went to gaming, and I'm looking at like the alien laptops and the high-end laptops, right? Then at the bottom, it might have similar products and it might be all the rest of the gaming laptops within the gaming category, right? However, that may or may not be helpful, but what if I really want that laptop and I'm looking at that laptop and I keep coming back and looking at that laptop, trying to sell me a different laptop or showing me 7 other laptops doesn't help me at all. However, showing me all the accessories that I can get with this laptop, like a VR headset, an additional RAM upgrade, an external hard drive, a custom case, a cooling tower, the extended block for having multiple 4K monitors, those kinds of things, probably cooler. Or if I'm in the gaming laptop category, maybe I want to see on the side there, hey, by the way, since you're in gaming laptops, these are the top 3 selling gaming laptops over the last 60 days. Or these are the top selling accessories of people who bought this exact laptop. Okay, now that's much more dynamic. That's much more applicable to my exact experience with what I'm doing right now and has a much higher likelihood of improving what I buy and potentially increasing your revenue as the marketplace owner, right? Because now you're dynamically enhancing and helping my purchasing experience, not just confusing me by throwing me a list of the other 275 laptops in the gaming category, which most marketplaces do, right? I mean, how many times have you gone to Amazon, scrolled down, and there's 75 carousels with 100 products each, and you're just like, way too much stuff to look at. It's not that helpful, right? And half of the time when I go to buy something and I scroll down to see what it's also bought with, it's bought with a similar item that doesn't help. It's not intelligent. It doesn't help me. It's just a static list of, hey, here's a bunch of other stuff you might look at, right? So really the purpose, in my opinion, for the AI and machine learning is to take related products or recently viewed products, which are non-intelligent, static lists of information, and make it intelligent. How do we make it intelligent? By making it applicable to what I'm doing in my shopping experience. And that's where I think AI and machine learning really plugs in. So Chris, if you agree with that, go ahead and expound on that if you want, or go ahead and dive in and talk about how we now implement that. How does it actually work?
Yeah, it's such an exciting burgeoning field. There are a lot of different aspects here. And I want to expand on some of the other opportunities as we keep digging into this topic. So we'll get to those here in just a minute. But sort of to your question, how do we implement that? That's a really important question to answer. And this is sort of a dynamic aspect of e-commerce with AI, because foundationally, some of the e-commerce systems that are out there, they leverage AI, but there are copyright and licensing and pricing aspects that make it untenable long term. So that's something that you want to be looking at is, does your marketplace, in this case, platform, respect the copyright, licensing, and other pricing rules that are associated with the AI infrastructure that you put in place? And that may seem trivial, but it shouldn't. It's just like anything else. There are open source options. The open source options for AI, in many cases, have been trained at the cost of millions, if not tens of millions of dollars, to train the AI on billions and billions of records of data. And so if you sort of think about it, like, you're getting that for free, and you need to comply with the rules that are associated with how this is being licensed. This is a big opportunity for legal folks to take advantage and enforce the rules in the long term if folks don't properly adhere to the terms. Now, the other thing that I would say in general is infrastructure-wise with AI, there are several different categories. I would sort of generally break it out into 3 categories. And there are subsets of this, but generally I would say there are things that are like natural language and being able to deal with natural language processing. This tends to use what are called transformers. And I won't go into a ton of detail, but there have been some major breakthroughs. A lot of folks may have heard of GPT-3, and they may have actually worked with and interacted with GPT-3. But this infrastructure of natural language processing, for which there are a lot of nice open source solutions. So not just paid solutions, but open source as well, that basically can handle chatbots, reviews, product descriptions, being able to really deal with a lot of intelligent thought around search, these kind of things. Well, that really would be natural language processing in that sort of segment. Then you can, within that, you can train it to cater it and customize it to a specific niche or category that you're focused on, and actually enhance the model for your particular business and set of categories that you focus on. Then you have sort of imagery. And again, I won't go into a ton of detail here, but there have been a lot of breakthroughs around diffusion. And this is a really powerful framework for doing things like identifying bad images, being able to identify like category of an image and see if it's correct for a product. Did somebody upload a bad image, or is it a good image? What's the tone of the image? And then, of course, being able to even generate product images or category images that make sense, even though the seller doesn't have that. How cool is that? And so there's a lot around imagery and imaging that we can do with diffusion-based models. And then finally, this probably like less sexy, but really powerful third model is based on tabular data. And this is sort of like analytics of users visiting the site and browsing the site, interacting with the site, sales order data, order history, that kind of a thing. And so this can be very informative to sellers so that they can get data that's de-identified across the entire system, the entire marketplace. Data as a service that's enhanced and fine-tuned so they can get really good insights on how to execute. And then you also have, like you were talking about, Ron, intelligent recommendations that sort of at the limit help augment and really just reduce friction. They augment the user's experience and reduce friction. This can apply both on the support side of things within the marketplace. I mean, imagine a support team member has great data on somebody who's been browsing the site, and they can sort of see, like, from the AI what's recommended to support them. Then you have, like you were talking about, intelligent recommendations that are just like mind-blowing in some cases. But based on using tabular data, we can really explore the limits of the data and apply just logic and reasoning so that users get an incredible experience. So we'll dive into some of these next, and I'm really excited to sort of go through some examples of each of these areas because each of them are unique and powerful within a marketplace e-commerce.